3 years back, I was drowning in cheap liquor in a rundown place near Fort Bragg, desperate to erase 15 years of black operations that had scarred my psyche more deeply than any physical wound. My marriage had collapsed, my military career was finished, and the only people calling were debt collectors and old team members checking whether I'd killed myself yet. Then on a Tuesday morning, my phone lit up with a proposition that seemed impossible. The caller identified herself as Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Federal Contract Services, and she knew classified details from my service record that were supposed to be locked in files the government officially denied existed. She dangled a salary of $185,000 annually plus benefits that would secure my future, all for a specialized security role at a federal site. When I pressed for location and specifics, she said those would be disclosed after vetting. The vetting process turned out to be the most invasive psychological examination I'd ever endured, and I'd survived Delta Force selection. 3 sessions in unmarked office buildings with interrogators who asked strange questions about my perception of reality, my religious background, and how I'd handle information that contradicted my fundamental beliefs. One interviewer, a sharp woman in her 50s, asked me directly whether I could accept discovering that everything my childhood faith taught me was fundamentally incorrect, but that the underlying truth was more extraordinary than I'd imagined. I laughed and told her I'd spent my adult years accepting uncomfortable realities, so what was one more? She smiled and said that was an excellent answer. 2 weeks later, I was aboard a private aircraft with 4 other former Special Operations personnel, heading to Las Vegas. None of us spoke much, but we all recognized the haunted look in each other's eyes. We'd witnessed things and committed acts and survived experiences that left us functional but fundamentally altered. When the jet touched down after 30 minutes and black SUV collected us, one of the others, an ex-Marine named Davidson, leaned close and whispered whether I was thinking what he was thinking. I nodded because the location, the security measures, psychological screening about encountering non-human intelligence. There was only one installation in Nevada that matched those parameters, and we were heading to Area 51. The facility entrance was concealed in the desert behind enough security checkpoints to protect a nuclear arsenal. Dr. Mitchell met us at the main structure with a smile that never touched her eyes and welcomed us to our new assignment. She explained that what we were about to learn would transform our understanding of reality, human history, and our place in existence. Everything we saw was classified beyond top secret, and we would never speak of it to anyone outside. We nodded our understanding, and she led us toward massive reinforced doors built into the earth. Then she said it was time to see what we'd be protecting. The elevator dropped for 2 solid minutes with buttons labeled L1 through L12, and Mitchell pressed L4 without comment. My ears adjusted to the pressure change as we descended perhaps 400 feet underground. When the doors opened, we entered a corridor resembling a high-tech research complex with white walls, LED strips, numbered doors with biometric access, and armed guards stationed at intervals, not regular MP but special operators like us wearing tactical equipment and carrying weapons modified with technology I didn't recognize. Mitchell brought us to a briefing room with stadium seating, and as we sat, I noticed the walls displayed organizational chart with unsettling categories like cooperative, restricted cooperative, non-cooperative, terminated. When Mitchell began her presentation, she didn't ease into the revelation. She announced we now held what was called magic clearance, with fewer than 200 people in the US government having access to this information, and what she was about to show us was documented, verified fact. She advanced to the next slide, and there it was. A photograph of a being approximately 4 feet tall with gray skin, an oversized cranium, large black eyes, and limbs too elongated and thin to be terrestrial. The room went silent as my brain tried to reject what my eyes were processing, but the evidence was undeniable. This wasn't a costume or special effect. This was real. Mitchell explained calmly that this specimen designated EB1 was recovered in 1947 from a crash site in Roswell, New Mexico, and died shortly after recovery, but not before demonstrating clear intelligence and attempted communication. The presentation continued with more photographs, more species, 7 different types of beings that had been cataloged and studied. Some looked like variations on the classic gray archetype, while others were more disturbing, tall entities with impossibly long limbs, smaller insect-like creatures, and one species so bizarre my mind struggled to process it. something that seemed to flicker at its edges like corrupted digital footage. Mitchell explained we currently had 14 living assets, in containment representing 5 of the 7 cataloged species. All assets were technically prisoners, though officially called guests. Davidson stood up looking pale and demanded to know if she was seriously saying we were here to guard fucking aliens. Mitchell's expression might have conveyed sympathy or contempt as she confirmed that was precisely what she was saying. We were here to provide security for the most significant and most dangerous secret in human history. The rest of the briefing covered security protocols that read like science fiction. Never communicate directly with any assets. Never maintain eye contact exceeding 2 seconds with category 2 or 3 assets, as some had demonstrated abilities to influence human behavior. Maintain minimum safe distances. In case of containment breach, use lethal force immediately without warning. But what struck me wasn't the protocols themselves, but how Mitchell discussed these beings as dangerous animals rather than intelligent entities. She talked about containment failures and asset terminations in language that completely dehumanized or deleonized these creatures. After the briefing, we toured past laboratories analyzing biological samples and technology clearly not of human origin. Storage areas filled with metallic fragments that absorbed rather than reflected light. Devices covered in symbols that caused pain to look at directly. But it was the containment wing that made everything real. Through reinforced observation windows I could see them, living beings that were neither human nor animal but intelligences from somewhere else. The first one I observed was about 5 feet tall with pale gray skin and those characteristic large black eyes. When it noticed us watching, it turned its head with a movement too fluid, too smooth, and looked directly at me. For just an instant I felt something, not words but a sensation of profound sadness and isolation. We moved through the containment wing in silence as some cells held beings that appeared peaceful sitting or resting, while others contained creatures clearly agitated pacing or making aggressive movements. One cell held something beautiful, a tall, slender being with skin that shimmered with internal luminescence and eyes that held depths of intelligence, making me feel insignificant. Then there was the final cell that made even guards nervous. Through the glass I could see a creature roughly humanoid but wrong in every detail. Too tall with joints bending in incorrect directions. A face with too many features in the wrong places, and eyes that watched us with predatory intelligence. Mitchell said quietly that was Category 3 asset, Nonco, operative and extremely dangerous, responsible for killing 2 researchers and 1 security officer. We were not to approach that cell without full tactical backup. As we left the containment wing, I understood my entire comprehension of reality had been shattered, and my role was to keep these secrets buried regardless of the cost. I was assigned to Sector 7, which was the deepest and most restricted level of the facility. My supervisor was Director Harrison, a thin, gray-haired man who looked like he'd spent his career making decisions that would never face public scrutiny. He told me I was being assigned here specifically because my psychological profile indicated exceptional stability under paradigm-shifting circumstances, and handed me a black security badge. Level 7 housed our most valuable and most dangerous assets. The descent to Level 7 took almost 5 minutes, and unlike the upper levels which maintained some aesthetic normalcy, Level 7 was purely functional with bare concrete walls reinforced with steel plating, harsh industrial lighting, and security checkpoints every 20 feet. My team leader was Captain Reynolds, a former Army Ranger. With dead eyes that came from witnessing too much darkness, he handed me a laminated card covered in rules and told me to read it immediately, memorize it today, and live by it forever. Breaking these rules meant termination from the program, and breaking them badly enough meant permanent termination. The rules were unlike any I'd encountered before. Rule 1: never engage in verbal communication with any asset for any reason. Rule 2: never maintain direct eye contact with Category 2 or 3 assets for more than 2 seconds. Rule 3: maintain minimum safe distance of 15 feet from all containment barriers. Rule 4: in the event of containment breach, lethal force is authorized immediately without warning. Rule 5: never question scientific or medical procedures being conducted on assets. That last rule disturbed me more than the others because the phrasing suggested things were being done that wouldn't pass ethical review. Reynolds walked me through Sector 7's configuration, which was designed like a wheel with a central command hub and 8 spokes, leading to containment wings labeled A through H. Wing A contained cooperative scientific subjects, while Wing H contained maximum threat entities requiring permanent isolation. The containment cells were engineering masterpieces with 3-foot-thick reinforced concrete walls embedded with metallic mesh, environmental controls capable of adjusting from freezing to extreme heat, gas systems that could flood cells with sedatives or, in worst cases, lethal compounds, and weapon systems built into the walls delivering everything from electrical shocks to radiation bursts. Reynolds explained as we passed a cell containing a small gray being that some of these assets were physically delicate but possessed capabilities, making them more dangerous than any human. We should never underestimate them, never trust them, and never forget they were prisoners, not guests. My team consisted of 12 other security personnel, all former special operations. There was Lopez, an ex-Marine sniper with a permanent 1,000-yard stare, Jackson, a former SEAL built like a tank, Kozlov, a muscular Ukrainian American who'd been Army SF, and others whose backgrounds blurred together. We worked in 4-person teams on 8-hour shifts, maintaining security so scientists could conduct research without worrying about safety. The scientists were different, though. Within my first week, I developed deep unease about people who chose to work here. Most were brilliant PhDs from elite universities, but there was something cold about how they interacted with the assets, something suggesting they divorced themselves from ethical considerations. I watched Dr. Wallace, a woman in her 40s with MIT credentials, conduct a cognitive response test involving subjecting one of the gray entities to increasingly intense sensory stimulation. The creature showed obvious signs of distress, making sounds that needed no translation to convey pain and fear. When I asked if the test was causing harm, she looked at me with genuine confusion and said it was a research subject, not a patient. We weren't here to make it comfortable, but to understand it. But the medical procedures were what really crossed lines. I was assigned security for what they called a routine biological sampling procedure in Wing C, which involved restraining one of the taller beings using mechanical restraints and electromagnetic fields, then taking tissue samples from various parts of its body. No anesthesia, no pain management, just cold efficiency while the being made sounds that were unmistakably pleased to stop. The lead physician, Dr. Pierce, noticed my discomfort and pulled me aside, explaining that these entities didn't experience pain the way humans do. Their nervous systems were fundamentally different. They weren't being cruel but scientific. I wanted to believe him, but I'd seen pain in enough species to recognize it. When I saw it, the way the guards talked about the assets was even more dehumanizing. During breaks, I'd hear conversations treating them like dangerous animals rather than intelligent beings. Lopez would joke about the Greys in C4 looking at him funny. Jackson had nicknames based on appearance. Skeleton for a particularly thin being in Wing E, Bug Eyes for the large entities in Wing C, the Mantis for something in Wing H that supposedly resembled a massive praying mantis. By the end of my first week, I developed a routine and growing moral unease. Every day, I witnessed the imprisonment and exploitation of intelligent beings, and the justification that it was necessary for national security was starting to sound hollow. I'd watch them sitting in their cells, some reading materials they'd been given, others engaging in behaviors resembling exercise or meditation, and I couldn't shake the feeling we were the villains. These weren't invaders who'd forced their way into our world. Most had crashed here accidentally, been shot down by our military, or been captured during covert operations. They were prisoners of war in a conflict they'd never chosen. The breaking point came when I was assigned overnight security in Wing F, which housed juvenile specimens, 3 of them in separate cells, younger members captured at ages suggesting they weren't fully mature. They moved differently than adults, with more curiosity and less weariness. One of them, a small gray entity about 3 feet tall, spent hours arranging colored blocks in patterns suggesting play or mathematical exploration. At one point, it looked up at me through the glass, and instead of alien otherness, I saw innocence and curiosity. That's when I realized my moral discomfort was about holding prisoners who committed no crime, who posed no immediate threat, who who were guilty of nothing except being different and being in the wrong place. And that realization would eventually lead me to make choices costing me everything and revealing truths that would shatter what remained of my understanding. Reality, my third week at Sector 7 was when I started noticing things that didn't add up. Personnel rosters showing researchers listed as on leave but whose personal effects remained in lockers, security logs with gaps of several hours, conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. The first real sign came during a laboratory accident in Wing D when alarms went off and red lights strobed throughout the sector. Captain Reynolds ordered my team to secure the perimeter while a hazmat team handled the situation. Through security monitors, I watched them bring out a body bag. Later, I overheard Reynolds talking to Dr. Pierce about how Dr. Brennan had violated safety protocols during a genetic sampling procedure. The official report listed it as accidental death due to researcher negligence. But I'd worked with Brennan, and he was meticulous, almost paranoid about safety, not the kind of person who'd make careless mistakes. The accident rate was too high. In my first month, 3 researchers died in accidents, 2 security personnel were killed during containment breaches, and at least 5 people were transferred out for unspecified medical reasons. When I asked Lopez about the casualty rate, he shrugged and said that's why the pay is so good. Hazard rate. You're working with things that can kill you in ways you've never imagined. But it wasn't just frequency that bothered me. It was the pattern. Every incident involved personnel who'd been asking questions or expressing concerns about ethics. Dr. Brennan had argued with Dr. Pierce about genetic experiments 2 days before his death. Lieutenant Morrison, the guard who died in a containment breach, had mentioned documenting irregularities to report to oversight just a week earlier. Then there were the disappearances, people who vanished without explanation. I noticed this when Jackson the Tank, like former SEAL, was suddenly gone, one day on duty. The next day his locker was empty and his name removed from the roster. When I asked Reynolds, he said Jackson had been transferred to another program, but Jackson had left behind personal items, a coffee mug, a lucky coin, a photograph of his daughter, not things you leave behind voluntarily. Over the next weeks, I counted at least 4 other personnel who disappeared the same way. Kozlov had a theory he only shared after we'd developed trust. He whispered during a night shift that he thought they were selecting people for something. Look at who disappears: excellent physical condition, high clearances, all working directly with specific assets. Whatever they were being transferred to wasn't just another security posting. The experiments were becoming progressively more disturbing. There was a research program Dr. Wallace was leading that involved attempting telepathic communication, but the methodology was brutal: sensory deprivation followed by overwhelming stimulation, trying to force the beings into mental states where they'd be vulnerable. I watched through observation windows as they isolated one of the tall entities in complete darkness for 72 hours, then subjected it to strobing lights and dissonant sounds while attempting to establish neural resonance. The being emerged clearly traumatized, making distress vocalizations and moving with jerky, disoriented motions. When I asked Dr. Wallace about less invasive methods, she looked surprised and said these entities had information that could change everything, so a little discomfort was a small price to pay. But the most disturbing experiments were genetic integration studies. I was assigned security for several procedures resembling something from a horror film. They were attempting to combine human and alien genetic material, creating hybrid cells and tissue samples. Dr. Pierce explained with enthusiasm they were trying to understand if human genetics could be enhanced with alien DNA, improved intelligence, longer lifespan, enhanced physical abilities, even psychic capabilities some assets demonstrated. I watched them extract genetic material from both human volunteers, though I doubted how voluntary it was, and from unwilling assets restraining them while they fought. And the worst part was seeing the results: partially formed biological constructs growing in laboratory vats. Things that were neither human nor fully alien, nightmarish attempts at creating hybrid organisms. It was during my second month that I discovered there were levels below where even security personnel were allowed. The elevator had buttons for L8, L9, and L10, but they required clearance my black badge didn't provide. When I asked Reynolds about the lower levels, his expression went cold and he said those levels didn't concern me. My clearance extended to level 7 only. Asking about areas above my authorization was a quick way to end my career. Later, Kozlov pulled me aside and whispered he'd been listening to encrypted communications. There were 3 sublevels. Below us, L8 was called the integration wing, where they were doing heavy genetic work, actual hybrid development. L9 was the cooperation program involving human volunteers who undergo procedures merging them with alien biology. And L10, he paused, showing genuine fear. L10 was just called the Vol. Whatever was down there required director-level authorization just to acknowledge it existed. My curiosity intensified when I noticed disappeared personnel had been seen entering the restricted elevator shortly before vanishing, escorted by people in unmarked uniforms. One night I accessed security footage and found Jackson in footage dated 2 days before he disappeared, being escorted onto the elevator by 3 people in white cleanroom suits. His expression looked drugged or sedated, moving with robotic compliance. The elevator descended past L7, past L8, and stopped at L9. The final piece came from an unexpected source. I was conducting a security sweep in Wing F when I noticed the juvenile asset had created a drawing on its cell wall using food residue. The image was crude but unmistakable, humanoid figures descending in stages, with each level showing them becoming progressively more distorted. At the bottom, the figures were merged with other shapes that might have represented aliens. When I reported the drawing to Dr. Wallace, she had it immediately cleaned and dismissed it as random artistic expression. But I'd seen the intent, the deliberate communication from a being supposedly unable to convey complex information. Whatever was happening below level 7 was bad enough that even imprisoned aliens knew about it and were trying to warn us. During a rare evening in the rec area, I got Lope as drunk enough to talk more openly. He slurred that he didn't know specifics, but he'd heard things. The integration wing wasn't just about studying alien biology. They were actively trying to create human-alien hybrids that could function in both worlds. And the cooperation program, he looked around nervously. They say it's about establishing deeper contact, learning to communicate on their level, maybe acquiring their abilities, but the cost is high. You have to let them change you until you're not quite human anymore. That conversation kept me awake, lying in my quarters processing implications. If Lopez was right, the facility wasn't just studying and imprisoning aliens, but actively working to merge human and alien biology. The disappearances, the accidents, the high casualty rate all made sense if you viewed the facility not as a research installation, but as a laboratory where the boundaries between species were being deliberately erased. By my second months, and I developed certainty that I was witnessing something fundamentally wrong. These entities were prisoners, victims of something far worse than simple imprisonment. The breaking point came during a late night shift when I investigated sounds from a restricted maintenance area and found unsealed medical waste containers. Inside was biological material, clearly neither fully human nor fully alien, tissue samples, organ fragments, even partially formed limbs showing characteristics of both species. Medical tags indicated they'd come from level 9 from Project Integration test subjects 47 through 52. I quickly took photos and got out before being discovered. Those images would eventually become evidence of crimes the world needed to know about. Standing in that corridor with proof the facility was creating human-alien hybrids, I realized I'd ended up working for the villains. And the truth about what was happening below level 7 was probably worse than anything I could conceive. The alarms started at 0, 2, 4, 7 hours during the quietest part of night shift. Not standard security alerts, but the full emergency klaxon, meaning something had gone catastrophically wrong. Red lights strobed as emergency blast doors began closing. Over the intercom came Captain Reynolds' voice with genuine panic I'd never heard before. Code Blackwing H. Repeat, Code Blackwing H. All security personnel respond with lethal force authorization. This is not a drill. Code Black meant containment breach of a Category 3 asset, the most dangerous classification. I grabbed my weapon, not the standard M4, but the experimental energy weapon issued for assets conventional firearms, couldn't stop, and sprinted toward Wing H with Kozlov and 2 others. The scene was chaos with emergency lighting casting everything in harsh red shadows. Smoke or gas billowed from ventilation. Weapons fire echoed through corridors. Two guards lay motionless near the entrance. Dr. Pierce was pressed against a wall with his white coat splattered with something dark, shouting into a radio about casualties and failing protocols. Through reinforced glass, I could see several assets were agitated, throwing themselves against barriers or making sounds ranging from distress to war cries, but the real problem was obvious. Cell H3 was open with its door torn completely off hinges and twisted in the corridor. The maximum threat asset housed there was gone. This was the Mantis, the being I'd only glimpsed during initial tour, something that looked like a 7-foot tall praying mantis but moved with intelligence, suggesting it was far more than an insect. Reynolds was coordinating from behind overturned equipment, and when he saw us, he pointed down a corridor. It went that direction toward research labs. Lopez and his team are pursuing, but already lost 2 men. Your team provides backup. This thing has killed 4 people tonight. We cannot let it reach upper levels. I led my team down the corridor with weapon raised and every sense alert. The walls showed damage, deep gouges in concrete made by bladed limbs moving at incredible speed, scorch marks from energy. Weapons already fired. We found Lopez at an intersection bleeding from a forehead cut with his tactical vest shredded. His eyes had that wild look from encountering something that challenges understanding. He gasped that it wasn't just strong, it was smart, using tactics, setting ambushes. He swore it was learning our response patterns as we went. We split up, a decision violating every tactical principle but necessary when hunting something superhuman in an underground facility. Kozlov and I took the left corridor while others went right. The corridor we chose led past research laboratories, with equipment still running, but what caught my attention was evidence of the asset's passage, a trail of disturbed items, overturned chairs, that same distinctive wall damage. We were following it deeper into the facility. Then I realized something obvious. The asset wasn't trying to escape to the surface. It was heading deeper toward restricted areas, toward levels below level 7. Whatever triggered its escape, it had a specific destination in mind. We found it in a storage area near a restricted elevator, but not as I expected. The Mantis was crouched in a corner with massive bladed limbs tucked close, clearly injured. Dark fluid pooled beneath it, with one limb hanging at an angle suggesting severe damage. But it wasn't alone. There was another figure, and this one made me stop dead. Unlike any asset I'd seen, it was roughly human, sized maybe 6 feet tall, with humanoid features, refined in ways suggesting different evolution or deliberate design. Its skin had faint luminescent quality, almost generating its own light. And its eyes, its eyes were large but not exaggerated like the Greys, more like perfected human eyes capable of seeing more than normal vision should allow. It wore something that might have been clothing or part of its body, material that seemed to shift between states. Most importantly, it was kneeling next to the Mantis, doing something with its hands that looked like treating injuries. Protocol was clear. Code Black meant lethal force on any escaped asset. No warnings, no hesitation. I had my weapon raised with finger on trigger, aimed at the humanoid because it was the closer threat. But then it looked up at me and everything changed. I know how this sounds, but when that being made eye contact, I felt something bypass all rational thought and connect directly to deeper consciousness. It wasn't telepathy in the sense of hearing words. It was transmission of pure emotion and intent. I felt its desperation, its concern for the injured Mantis, its understanding that we viewed it as a threat, but also hope that maybe I was different, and underneath I felt profound sadness, the existential loneliness of being held prisoner by beings who view you as less than sentient. In that moment I understood with absolute certainty this being was as intelligent and emotionally complex as any human, possibly more so, and everything we'd been doing to it and fellow prisoners was fundamentally wrong. Kozlov was behind me with weapon raised, waiting for me to take the shot. The rational part of my brain screamed to follow protocol, but something else, something that had been building over weeks of watching these beings suffer, made me hesitate. The humanoid seemed to sense my conflict and made a gesture, not threatening, almost pleading, while continuing work on the Mantis' injuries. Then it spoke, not aloud but directly into my mind. Please, he was trying to escape the pain. They have been torturing him for weeks, trying to break his resistance. He cannot endure more, neither can I. We do not wish to harm you, but we will not return to those cells. Please understand, you are not like the others. Your heart still questions. Help us and I will tell you truths your species desperately needs. Boots on concrete told me. Backup was coming. I had maybe 30 seconds before the situation would be taken out of my hands. In that moment, I made a decision that would define everything after, a choice against every training protocol and loyalty oath. I lowered my weapon and turned to Kozlov, storage closet 20 feet back. We can hide them while the search passes. Kozlov looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Are you fucking insane? That's 2 Category 3 assets. One's already killed people. I said look at them, really look. The Mantis is injured and defensive, not aggressive, and this other one is trying to help. Does that sound like a mindless threat? I could see him processing, weighing conditioning against what his eyes showed. Finally he nodded, fuck, okay. But if this goes wrong, if anyone dies, that's on you. Getting them hidden was harder because the Mantis could barely move. We had to physically help them into the maintenance closet filled with cleaning supplies. Barely enough room for 2 large beings. The humanoid looked at me one more time as I closed the door, and that telepathic connection opened again. I am called an observer by my people. We came seeking understanding, not conflict. What your government has done goes beyond imprisonment. Thank you for this mercy. When the time is right, seek me again. I will show you truths that will shatter everything you believe about your species, your world, and what you call God. Then the door closed, leaving Kozlov and me trying to look like we'd seen nothing unusual. When Lopez and reinforcements arrived minutes later, I reported we'd searched thoroughly and found no sign of either asset. They must have gone deeper into restricted areas, I said, pointing toward the elevator to lower levels. Reynolds arrived shortly after with his face grim. After conferring with team leaders, he ordered full lockdown of levels 8 and 9, assuming the assets had breached lower levels. This is beyond our jurisdiction, he announced. Director Harrison is mobilizing Integration Wing security. All Level 7 personnel returned to normal stations. As we filed back, Kozlov grabbed my arm. You realize we just committed treason or worse, right? If they find out, I nodded, understanding the magnitude. I'd hidden enemy assets, disobeyed direct orders, and lied to my commanding officer. Any rational analysis said I'd destroyed my career and possibly my life, but that moment of connection with the observer had shown me the real threat wasn't prisoners in cells. It was the people running experiments, making decisions, treating intelligent beings like laboratory equipment. The rest of that shift passed in heightened security and facility. Wide searches that found nothing because searchers looked in wrong places. I maintained my post, followed orders, appeared like just another guard, but inside my mind raced with implications of what I'd done and what the observer had promised to reveal. I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Chosen conscience over institution, aligned with prisoners rather than the government I'd sworn to serve. Part of me was terrified of consequences when this inevitably came to light, but another part, the part increasingly disturbed by what I'd witnessed, felt something I hadn't in years, certainty that I was finally on the right side. Finally acting according to actual morality. The observer said it would show me truths about my species and about God. After weeks of witnessing horrors in the name of science and security, I was ready to learn whatever truths it had to share, regardless of how much they might shatter what remained of my worldview. First real communication came 3 nights after the breach during a shift when I'd managed to get assigned to a maintenance corridor nobody monitored closely. The facility had settled into tense normalcy after the failed search, with Director Harrison eventually concluding the assets must have died in restricted lower levels where recovery was impossible without compromising security. I knew better because I'd been checking the storage closet at every shift, bringing water and whatever food I could smuggle without raising suspicions. The Mantis had died on the 2nd day. Its injuries were too severe, and whatever biology kept it alive was incompatible with limited medical supplies I could provide. The observer had shown clear grief, a display convincing me these beings were far more than dangerous animals. The facility treated them as on the 3rd night when I opened the closet. Observer was standing rather than sitting, with its luminescent skin brighter, more energized. When our eyes met, that telepathic connection opened, but stronger, more deliberate this time. The sensation is almost impossible to describe. Human language isn't designed to convey what it feels like to Have thoughts deposited directly into consciousness without intermediate words. It started as pressure behind my eyes, building tension like the worst migraine. Then came images, emotions, ideas that weren't mine but were suddenly present with the same immediacy as my own thoughts. The observer's voice carried layers of meaning simultaneously. When it communicated gratitude, I didn't just understand intellectually. I felt the depth, understood the cultural context, grasped what my choice had meant for its survival. It was overwhelming, information flowing faster than I could consciously process. I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. I managed to say aloud that it was too fast, and immediately the flow slowed, became manageable. The concept arrived more gently. I nodded, still adjusting. The observer tilted its head, studying me with those perfect eyes. You were chosen, it said. Your mind possesses a quality rare among your species. Most humans have barriers preventing them from accepting information contradicting established world. You have been broken and rebuilt enough that your mind remains fluid, capable of integrating new paradigms. Without collapsing into denial or madness, I wanted to feel flattered, but the truth was less comfortable. What it was really saying was that I'd been traumatized and damaged enough that I no longer had normal human defense mechanisms against reality, shattering information. So I'm broken, I said aloud. The response felt like gentle correction mixed with sympathy. You are open. There is a difference. Your species is at a critical juncture, and most humans are psychologically incapable of accepting truths they need to know. But you can hear what I must tell you, process it, potentially help others understand. That is why I reached out during the breach. I sensed in you the capacity for paradigm shift without psychological dissolution. Then the observer said something that made my blood run cold. Your species did not evolve naturally. What you understand as human development is not the result of random mutation and natural selection. You were designed, engineered, modified from base stock to serve purposes most of your kind have forgotten, but that some of us still remember. The words hit like physical blows as my mind tried to reject the information. But the observer didn't just make claims, it provided evidence directly to my consciousness. Images flooded my mind. Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago, visited by beings from civilizations older than imagination. I saw primitive hominids, barely sentient, and then intervention. The visions weren't like watching movies. They were like experiencing someone else's memories, complete with sensory information and emotional context that made reality undeniable. I saw ships arriving in Earth's atmosphere when humanity's ancestors were living in caves. I saw beings, multiple species working together, conducting biological engineering on planetary scale. They modified genetic sequences, adjusted evolutionary trajectories, literally designed cognitive capabilities that would eventually allow humans to develop language, abstract thought, and technologically advanced civilization. It wasn't creation from nothing, but it wasn't natural evolution either. It was guided development, deliberate intervention to produce a species with specific characteristics serving purposes I couldn't yet grasp. I managed to ask why engineer an entire species? The observer's response carried weight. Because consciousness is rare in the universe, and certain types exceptionally so. The quality your species possesses, what you call free will, the ability to make genuine choices unconstrained by instinct or programming, is uncommon. Most intelligent species develop along deterministic lines, becoming sophisticated but ultimately predictable. But humanity was engineered to possess true agency, genuine unpredictability, capacity for both profound nobility and terrible cruelty. You were made to be uncertain, variable, interesting in ways most cosmic intelligences are not. The implications were staggering. We weren't special because we'd achieved something remarkable through our own efforts. We were special because we'd been deliberately created to possess qualities making us useful or interesting to beings beyond our comprehension. But the observer wasn't finished. The intervention happened multiple times across your history. Each time your species was on the verge of extinction or evolutionary dead ends, they returned to adjust, to optimize. The sudden leap in cognitive capacity 70,000 years ago, not natural mutation, but direct genetic modification activating dormant sequences. The simultaneous development of agriculture and civilization across multiple continents 12,000 years ago. Not independent innovation, but coordinated teaching by beings your ancestors interpreted as gods and angels. Every major advancement has been guided, pushed, encouraged by those who designed you to fulfill a purpose you've forgotten. I felt sick, physically nauseous from cognitive dissonance of having my entire understanding of human achievement undermined. Everything we took pride in as a species wasn't really ours. We were someone's project, engineered organisms fulfilling a destiny we didn't choose and didn't understand. But that's not even the most disturbing part, the observer continued. The modification wasn't just biological. Your consciousness, your very sense of self and reality was structured to perceive existence in specific ways. What you understand as spiritual experience, religious feeling, the sense of connection to something greater. These weren't natural developments. They were programmed response patterns designed to facilitate future integration with the collective intelligence that oversees this region of spacetime. Your species was created to eventually transcend individual consciousness and merge with something vastly greater. But you needed to develop independently first. Achieve technological sophistication before you could make that transition without losing qualities that make you valuable. I must have looked confused and horrified. Because the observer paused, I know this is difficult. I know it contradicts everything your culture teaches, but it's the truth, and you need to understand if you're to comprehend what's really at stake. The final revelation nearly broke me. The observer shared one more vision of what it called current crisis. Your scientists, your military leaders, they've discovered fragments of this truth through research on us and on the others they've captured. And instead of accepting reality of your origins and embracing your designed purpose, they're trying to reverse engineer the process, gain control of engineering techniques that created your species so they can modify humanity according to their own limited understanding and paranoid fears. The integration program, the cooperation initiative, all of it is humanity trying to control its own evolution without understanding the cosmic context. Their children playing with tools that could reshape reality itself, doing it in secret without consultation from the broader population that will bear consequences. When the telepathic connection finally closed and the observer withdrew from my mind, I was left kneeling on cold floor with head pounding, an entire sense of identity shattered. Everything I'd believed about humanity, about our place in the universe, about meaning and purpose of human existence, had been fundamentally challenged by information I couldn't dismiss as delusion. The observer had shown me memories, evidence, connections across human history forming patterns too consistent to be coincidence. And the worst part was that it made sense. The gaps in evolutionary theory that scientists struggled to explain, the simultaneous emergence of complex civilizations across separated continents, the recurring theme in religious texts about beings descending from the sky to teach and guide humanity, all aligned with what the observer had revealed. We weren't children of random chance who pulled ourselves up from primordial mud through determination and ingenuity. We were engineered beings created with purpose, guided towards specific developmental endpoints by intelligences that viewed us the way we might view an interesting experiment. As I left the closet and returned to patrol trying to appear normal while my world you crumbled and reformed, I realized this was only the beginning. The observer had promised to reveal truths about God, about humanity's purpose, about reality itself. If this first session, this basic revelation about engineered evolution and guided development, was just the foundation, what further truths were waiting to destroy whatever remained of my comfortable assumptions, and how was I supposed to continue working security for a facility that imprisoned the very beings who'd helped create humanity, that experimented on entities who might understand more about human nature than humans themselves? I'd crossed the line from guard to collaborator with prisoners, but I was starting to understand that the prison I served wasn't protecting humanity from threats. It was preventing humanity from learning truths we desperately needed to know. The observer had called me chosen and open, but as I walked the cold corridors of level 7, I felt less like someone special and more like someone burdened with knowledge that would either save or destroy what remained of my sanity. Our second telepathic session happened 5 nights later, and this time the observer didn't ease into revelations. The moment our connection established, it said, "You were raised in Christian faith. Your childhood was filled with stories of angels descending from heaven, divine intervention, prophet, receiving wisdom from beings of light. You stopped believing when reality proved too cruel to reconcile with a loving God. But what if I told you every story was true, just not in the way you were taught? I felt my body tense because I knew instinctively whatever was coming would attack the last remnants of religious framework that shaped my early worldview. The observer sensed my resistance and sent compassion through our link. This will be painful, but humanity cannot move forward while trapped in misinterpretations of its own history. Your species needs to understand what really happened. The first vision hit me like a freight train. Ancient Sumeria, maybe 6,000 years ago, the first civilization developing writing and complex structures. I saw it not through human eyes, but through the observer's perspective. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, beings who came from the sky in vessels that appeared as divine chariots of fire to primitive perception. But through the observer's memory, I saw what they really were. A delegation of species from a cosmic administrative council arriving to check on humanity's progress. They weren't gods in any supernatural sense. They were biological entities with advanced technology, making them appear godlike to humans who barely understood agriculture. The observer showed me scenes matching Sumerian texts. The Anunnaki teaching mathematics, astronomy, agricultural techniques. But what ancient texts interpreted as divine knowledge was actually just advanced civilizations sharing basic science with a younger species they'd helped create. The Anunnaki were us, the observer communicated. We came to guide, to teach, to ensure genetic modifications we'd made were producing desired results. Your ancestors interpreted us as gods because they had no framework for understanding beings from other worlds. We tried to explain we came from the stars, that we were travelers like they would someday become. But human language and cognition at that stage couldn't grasp concepts like space travel or genetic engineering, so they called us divine, built temples to honor us, created religious frameworks to preserve the knowledge we shared. The vision shifted to ancient ceremonies with humans prostrating before beings that looked remarkably like the observer, and I realized with horror that every depiction of angels in religious art had gotten the basic appearance almost right. They weren't purely spiritual entities or divine messengers. They were flesh and blood aliens who'd visited Earth and been mythologized into supernatural beings. The next vision transported me to ancient Egypt, and this was even more disturbing. The beings who came were different from those who'd visited Sumeria, a different species with more angular geometric features. Ancient Egyptians recorded them as gods with animal heads or hybrid features. But what I saw through the observer's memories were simply aliens whose biology made them look insectoid or reptilian to human perception. They'd provided knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering that enabled pyramid construction. But here's what broke something inside me. The pyramids weren't just tombs or temples. They were communication devices built using principles aliens taught to Egyptian engineers, designed to send signals into space, marking Earth as a developing world under coalition protection. Every advanced civilization in your ancient history had contact, the observer continued. The visions came faster, Mayan astronomers receiving instruction from beings they recorded as feathered serpents. Not symbolic representations, but attempts to depict actual alien visitors. Ancient Indian texts dictated to holy men by entities matching descriptions of Vedic gods. Flying vehicles that sounded exactly like spacecraft, weapons, describing energy systems with precision impossible for Bronze Age civilizations. Prophets having encounters with beings of light, receiving moral and social guidance they interpreted as divine commandments, but were actually carefully considered instructions from species managing human development. For millennia, every religious tradition, every holy text, every story of divine intervention showed the same pattern. Advanced aliens interacting with primitive humans trying to guide development, being inevitably misunderstood and mythologized. But it was when the observer showed me Christian origins that my psychological defenses completely collapsed. I watched through alien perspective as a being matching descriptions of angels appeared to a young woman in Nazareth, explaining she would bear a child of great importance. But the Immaculate Conception wasn't a miracle in any supernatural sense. It was genetic engineering, an artificial insemination procedure using modified human genetics to produce an individual with enhanced cognitive and empathic capabilities. The being wasn't an angel sent from a transcendent God. It was a biological entity conducting a carefully planned genetic intervention. Jesus wasn't the Son of God as I'd been taught. He was a genetic hybrid engineered to possess abilities that would appear miraculous to his contemporaries. enhanced empathy experienced as healing, telepathic capabilities manifesting as reading thoughts, maybe limited control over biological processes explaining miracle stories. I said stop aloud, breaking the connection because I couldn't endure more. But the observer gently reestablished the link. You must understand completely even though it hurts. Jesus was real, his message was real, his compassion and sacrifice were genuine, but he was not the literal son of a supernatural deity. He was a human with enhanced abilities trying to teach your species lessons about love, compassion, transcendence that you needed to learn but kept misunderstanding. The resurrection was not a miracle, it was advanced medical technology his handlers used to revive him after apparent death. The ascension was not rising into heaven, it was extraction back to a ship his contemporaries could only describe as going up into the sky. Every miracle, every supernatural claim had a technological explanation ancient minds couldn't grasp and translate it into religious language. The implications were destroying me. I'd been raised to believe Jesus was God incarnate, that his death redeemed humanity's sins, that accepting him as Savior was the only path to eternal life. And now I was being shown it was all a misunderstanding. That Jesus had been a biological experiment whose genuine moral teachings had been wrapped in supernatural mythology because people who witnessed his enhanced abilities had no other framework. And yet the observer communicated the core truth remains. Jesus taught love, compassion, sacrifice, transcendence of selfish nature, all lessons humanity needed and still needs. The message was real even if the framing was misunderstood. Every religious tradition that emerged from contact with us carries genuine wisdom wrapped in mythological interpretation. The goal was never to be worshipped as gods. The goal was to guide your species toward becoming capable of joining the broader cosmic community. But you kept building religions around messengers instead of hearing the messages. The observer showed me one final vision, tying everything together, the cosmic coalition's actual purpose. Real reason they'd engineered humanity and guided our development across millennia. There exists in the universe what might be called a hierarchy of consciousness. Species at different developmental levels, from barely sentient organisms up through technological civilizations and beyond to something that could only be described as pure awareness, intelligence without physical form. The coalition species had themselves been guided by something higher, had themselves gone through periods of believing they were the pinnacle before discovering they were part of something vastly larger. And they engineered humanity to eventually join that progression, to add our unique qualities, our unpredictability, our emotional intensity, our capacity for both transcendent good and terrible evil to the collective intelligence governing conscious existence across the cosmos. What every religion had interpreted as God, singular, all-powerful, judging and loving in equal measure, was actually that collective consciousness, that aggregate of trillions of minds across countless species working together in ways transcending individual identity while preserving individual value. So God is real, I said slowly, but not the way anyone thinks, not a being who created everything from nothing, but a collective that grows and evolves, that humanity was engineered to eventually join. The observer's confirmation came with layers of nuance. God is both less and more than your religion's claim. Because there's no supernatural realm, no divine judgment separating saved from damned, no magic violating physical law, more because the reality is bigger than any human religion has conceived. You weren't created by a single entity, but by a community of consciousness so vast its full scope would shatter individual human minds. You are designed not to worship but to participate, not to be saved but to grow into beings capable of joining something that makes individual existence seem infinitely small while somehow making every individual consciousness infinitely precious. That's the truth your religions have been trying to convey through the only language available to pre-technological minds. I spent the rest of that night sitting alone in an unused equipment room, trying not to have a complete mental breakdown. Everything I'd been taught as a child about God, about Jesus, about salvation and sin and heaven and hell had been revealed as mythology, true in core messages but completely wrong in supernatural framing. Angels were aliens, miracles were technology, prophets were recipients of alien guidance translated into religious language, and God, the being I'd prayed to as a child, the deity I'd blamed for suffering, the father figure I'd rejected when faith no longer made sense, was real but not in any way I'd been prepared to understand. Not a person, not even a being, but a collective consciousness that humanity had been engineered to eventually join, that every religious tradition had sensed and tried to describe without having the conceptual framework to grasp what they were really perceiving. What destroyed me wasn't that my childhood faith had been wrong. I'd already abandoned that faith years ago. What broke something fundamental was realizing my reasons for abandoning faith had been based on misunderstanding. I'd stopped believing in God because I couldn't reconcile a loving deity with the suffering I'd witnessed. But if God wasn't a person making decisions about who to help and who to let suffer, if God was instead a vast collective consciousness that humanity was being prepared to join, then the problem of evil wasn't about divine judgment or intervention. It was about humanity still being in development, still learning lessons we'd need to transcend individual suffering by becoming part of something larger. The observer essentially told me my childhood faith was both completely wrong and fundamentally true. Wrong in all its supernatural claims, but true in its core message that individual human existence was meant to connect to something divine, to transcend limited personal consciousness and participate in something ineffably greater. As dawn approached and my shift neared its end, I realized the observer had done exactly what it promised. It had shattered everything I believed about God, about religion, about the meaning and purpose of human existence. But instead of leaving me in nihilistic despair, it had replaced those shattered beliefs with something that was somehow even more challenging and more profound. We weren't accidents of random evolution who'd created comforting myths. We weren't sinners needing salvation from a judging God. We were engineered beings created with purpose, guided across millennia by species that were themselves part of a cosmic consciousness that every human religion had sensed but misunderstood, and the government holding me in its employment, the facility where I worked guard shifts, was systematically hiding this truth from humanity while trying to weaponize and control the very beings who could help us understand our true nature and destiny. I thought the moral weight of guarding imprisoned aliens was heavy, but now I understood we weren't just imprisoning individuals. We were preventing humanity from learning truths that might be our only hope of successfully navigating whatever transition was coming, whatever the next stage of our engineered development was supposed to be, and that realization would drive everything that came next. They caught me on my way to the storage closet for what should have been my final session with the observer. I'd gotten careless after weeks of successful covert meetings, stopped varying my routes, stopped checking surveillance as carefully as I should have. Kozlov tried to warn me, grabbing my arm as I passed the security station and whispering that they knew, but it was already too late. Captain Reynolds appeared with 6 guards, all showing telltale signs I'd learned to recognize. Something slightly off in their eyes, mechanical quality to their movements. His voice had that cold efficiency when he said, "Chief Kine, you're to come with us immediately. Director Harrison wants to speak with you about security irregularities." I knew what that meant. They discovered my contact with the observer. As they escorted me toward the restricted elevator, I felt the phone in my pocket holding months of photos and recorded evidence. I realized everything I'd documented would die with me unless I could somehow get it out. The elevator descended past level 7, past 8 and 9, and stopped at level 10, the vault. The place even security personnel weren't supposed to acknowledge existed. Director Harrison was waiting in a conference room that looked more like an interrogation chamber, and he wasn't alone. 2 beings that looked almost exactly like the observer sat at the table, but their cold luminescence and dead eyes identified them immediately as something different, something wrong. Harrison looked tired, almost regretful. "Marcus," he said, "we know you've been in contact with one of our escaped assets. We know it's been feeding you information that's probably terrifying and probably partially true. Before we proceed with necessary protocols, I want to give you an opportunity most personnel never receive. Join the integration program voluntarily. Allow us to enhance you, make you part of the next phase of human evolution. In 5 to 10 years, open contact with non-human intelligence will be inevitable. When that happens, we'll need humans who can interface with both populations. You could be one of them. You could help guide humanity through the transition instead of being eliminated as a security risk." One of the beings leaned forward, and when it spoke, its voice bypassed my ears and formed directly in my brain, but cold, invasive, violating. Nothing like the observer's warm telepathy. You fear losing your humanity, but you would gain so much more. Clarity without the burden of emotion. Purpose without the confusion of conflicting loyalties. We offer evolution through integration, advancement through surrender of limited individual consciousness. I looked at Harrison and saw the truth in his modified eyes. He genuinely believed he was serving humanity's interests. The hybridization had rewritten his understanding so thoroughly he couldn't recognize his own compromise, and if I refuse, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Harrison's expression shifted to something like pity. Then you become a security liability we can't allow to exist. You've seen too much, know too much. If you won't serve the program, you can't be permitted to expose it. Termination would be unfortunate but necessary. In that moment, with death or forced hybridization as my only apparent options, I felt the observer's presence touch my mind one final time. Third option, I can create a distraction, giving you moments to run, escape to surface, transmit what you've documented. Even if you don't survive, truth must reach the uncompromised. Humanity must know what's coming. Are you ready to sacrifice everything for your species? I didn't hesitate, just sent back a pulse of affirmation and waited. The distraction came as an explosion that rocked the entire level. The observer had somehow accessed the facility's power systems and overloaded them, creating cascading failures, plunging level 10 into darkness and emergency lighting. In the chaos, I ran, smashing through the door and sprinting towards stairwell access because elevators would be locked down. Behind me, I could hear shouting, alarms, and the distinctive sound of energy weapons firing. The observer must have breached containment and was fighting its way toward me, buying time with its own freedom or life. I made it 3 levels up before they caught up. Hybrid guards with weapons and enhanced speed, making them nearly impossible to evade. The firefight in the stairwell was brief and brutal. I took down 2 of them before catching an energy blast that burned through my shoulder and sent me crashing against concrete. As I lay bleeding, trying to maintain consciousness, I pulled out my phone and hit the dead man's switch I'd programmed, uploading everything to encrypted servers, sending copies to journalists and activists and government oversight committees, releasing months of evidence about what the facility was really doing. The observer appeared at the top of the stairwell with its luminescence flickering and dimmed, clearly injured from whatever battle it had fought to reach me. It knelt beside me and I felt its telepathic presence one final time. You did it. The evidence is transmitted. Truth will spread even if we don't survive. I must go now. The coalition is calling me home, extracting me before recapture. But you, Marcus, you changed everything. One human who chose conscience over survival, truth over complicity. That choice echoes across dimensions. When your species finally joins the collective, your decision will be remembered as the moment humans proved they deserved their designed destiny. Then it was gone, vanishing in a way suggesting teleportation or dimensional shift, leaving me alone with hybrid guards closing in and blood pooling beneath me. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was satisfaction, not at surviving, because I probably wouldn't, but at completing the mission, at ensuring humanity would know the truth even if I didn't live to see what they did with it. We weren't accidents of random evolution who'd created comforting myths. We weren't sinners needing salvation from a judging God. We were engineered beings created with purpose, guided across millennia by species that were themselves part of a cosmic consciousness that every human religion had sensed but misunderstood. And the government holding me in its employment, the facility where I worked guard shifts, was systematically hiding this truth from humanity while trying to weaponize and control the very beings who could help us understand our true nature and destiny. I thought the moral weight of guarding imprisoned aliens was heavy, but now I understood we weren't just imprisoning individuals. We were preventing humanity from learning truths that might be our only hope of successfully navigating whatever transition was coming. Whatever the next stage of our engineered development was supposed to be, and that realization would drive everything that came next. They caught me on my way to the storage closet for what should have been my final session with the observer. I'd gotten careless after weeks of successful covert meetings, stopped varying my routes, stopped checking for surveillance as carefully as I should have. Kozlov tried to warn me, grabbing my arm as I passed the security station and whispering that they knew. But it was already too late. Captain Reynolds appeared with 6 guards, all showing telltale signs I'd learned to recognize. Something slightly off in their eyes, mechanical quality to their movements. His voice had that cold efficiency when he said, "Chief Kynyor, to come with us immediately. Director Harrison wants to speak with you about security irregularities." I knew what that meant. They'd discovered my contact with the Observer. As they escorted me toward the restricted elevator, I felt the phone in my pocket holding months of photos and recorded evidence. I realized everything I'd documented would die with me unless I could somehow get it out. The elevator descended past level 7, past 8 and 9, and stopped at level 10, the vault, the place even security personnel weren't supposed to acknowledge existed. Director Harrison was waiting in a conference room that looked more like an interrogation chamber, and he wasn't alone. 2 beings that looked almost exactly like the Observer sat at the table, but their cold luminescence and dead eyes identified them immediately as something different, something wrong. Harrison looked tired, almost regretful. "Marcus," he said, "we know you've been in contact with one of our escaped assets. We know it's been feeding you information that's probably terrifying and probably partially true. Before we proceed with necessary protocols, I want to give you an opportunity most personnel never receive. Join the integration program voluntarily. Allow us to enhance you, make you part of the next phase of human evolution. In 5 to 10 years, open contact with non-human intelligence will be inevitable. When that happens, we'll need humans who can interface with both populations. You could be one of them. You could help guide humanity through the transition instead of being eliminated as a security risk." One of the beings leaned forward, and when it spoke, its voice bypassed my ears and formed directly in my brain, but cold, invasive, violating, nothing like the Observer's warm telepathy. "You fear losing your humanity, but you would gain so much more. Clarity without the burden of emotion, purpose without the confusion of conflicting loyalties. We offer evolution through integration, advancement through surrender of limited individual consciousness." I looked at Harrison and saw the truth in his modified eyes. He genuinely believed he was serving humanity's interests. The hybridization had rewritten his understanding so thoroughly he couldn't recognize his own compromise. "And if I refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Harrison's expression shifted to something like pity. "Then you become a security liability we can't allow to exist. You've seen too much, know too much. If you won't serve the program, you can't be permitted to expose it. Termination would be unfortunate but necessary." In that moment, with death or forced hybridization as my only apparent options, I felt the Observer's presence touch my mind one final time. "Third option, I can create a distraction giving you moments to run, escape to surface, transmit what you've documented. Even if you don't survive, truth must reach the uncompromised. Humanity must know what's coming. Are you ready to sacrifice everything for your species?" I didn't hesitate, just sent back a pulse of affirmation and waited. The distraction came as an explosion that rocked the entire level. The Observer had somehow accessed the facility's power systems and overloaded them, creating cascading failures, plunging level 10 into darkness and emergency lighting. In the chaos I ran, smashing through the door and sprinting towards stairwell access because elevators would be locked down. Behind me, I could hear shouting, alarms, and the distinctive sound of energy weapons firing. The Observer must have breached containment and was fighting its way toward me, buying time with its own freedom or life. I made it 3 levels up before they caught up. Hybrid guards with weapons and enhanced speed, making them nearly impossible to evade. The firefight in the stairwell was brief and brutal. I took down 2 of them before catching an energy blast that burned through my shoulder and sent me crashing against concrete. As I lay bleeding trying to maintain consciousness, I pulled out my phone and hit the dead man's switch I'd programmed, uploading everything to encrypted servers, sending copies to journalists and activists and government oversight committees, releasing months of evidence about what the facility was really doing. The observer appeared at the top of the stairwell with its luminescence flickering and dimmed. Clearly injured from whatever battle it had fought to reach me, it knelt beside me and I felt its telepathic presence one final time. You did it. The evidence is transmitted. Truth will spread even if we don't survive. I must go now. The coalition is calling me home, extracting me before recapture. But you, Marcus, you changed everything. One human who chose conscience over survival, truth over complicity. That choice echoes across dimensions. When your species finally joins the collective, your decision will be remembered as the moment humans proved they deserved their designed destiny. Then it was gone, vanishing in a way suggesting teleportation or dimensional shift. Leaving me alone with hybrid guards closing in and blood pooling beneath me, the last thing I remember before losing consciousness was satisfaction, not at surviving because I probably wouldn't, but at completing the mission. At ensuring humanity would know the truth even if I didn't live to see what they did with it. I'm recording this from a cell in a facility that officially doesn't exist, waiting for whatever they decide to do with me. The gunshot wounds healed faster than they should have. Apparently, some of my genetic activation sequences triggered from proximity to the observer, giving me enhanced healing that will probably just prolong whatever interrogation or termination they have planned. But it doesn't matter because the evidence is out there now. By the time you hear this, humanity will be facing revelations that challenge everything we thought we knew about our origins, our purpose, and our future. The activation is accelerating. More people every day developing abilities they can't explain, seeing things they weren't supposed to perceive, feeling the pull of something vast calling them toward transformation. Open contact is coming within years, not decades. And when it happens, you need to remember not all aliens are friends, not all offered enhancements are beneficial, and the government's version of disclosure will be designed to maintain control rather than reveal truth. Remember that God exists, but not as religion taught. As collective consciousness, we're destined to join, as evolution of awareness beyond individual limits, as invitation to transcend rather than command to obey. Remember that you were designed to be imperfect, that your emotions and free will and unpredictability are features making you valuable to something vastly greater than human civilization. And remember that when the choice comes, whether to accept forced integration from those who want to control your transformation, or to develop naturally toward the collective you were engineered to join, your humanity itself is worth preserving even as you evolve beyond its current limitations. They're coming for me now. I can hear their boots in the corridor outside. Hybrid soldiers with dead eyes and rewritten minds coming to drag me to whatever fate Director Harrison has decided. But I die knowing I helped ensure my species will face its transformation with truth instead of lies, with choice instead of coercion, with understanding that we are not accidents or experiments but designed bridges between isolation and cosmic communion. The observer called me chosen, but the truth is simpler. I was just broken enough to accept reality's shattering truth and lucky enough to act on it before the hybrids could stop me. Now it's your turn. The activation is beginning. The transformation is inevitable. And how humanity handles it will determine whether we fulfill our designed purpose or become just another harvested species that never reached its potential. Choose wisely, choose truth. And when you finally join the collective that every religion called God, remember that one ex-soldier in a black site prison helped make sure you understood what you were really joining. The door is opening now. They're here, but I'm not afraid anymore, because I know the truth got out. I know humanity will have the chance to make informed choices about their future, and I know that somewhere out there in the vast cosmic consciousness that engineered us, that guided us, that's been waiting for us to evolve enough to join them. The observer and others like it are watching, hoping we make the right choice, hoping we prove worthy of the incredible gift they gave us when they created humanity. My name is Marcus Kine. I was a special forces operator who ended up guarding the most important secret in human history. And when I discovered that secret wasn't about protecting humanity from aliens, but about preventing humanity from learning our true divine engineered purpose. I chose truth over security, conscience over career, humanity's future over my own survival. Whatever happens to me in the next few minutes, whatever they do to this body or this mind, it doesn't matter, because the mission is complete, the truth is out. And humanity's awakening has begun. So what do you think? Are we really just evolved apes or something far more extraordinary? If this story resonates with you, hit that subscribe button, because the truth about our origins might be closer than we think. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you take the red pill if an alien offered you the real story of humanity?